Hello, and welcome to Successful Not Satisfied. Here is the podcast where we interview executives, CEOs, and business owners, much like you, who are trying to figure out how to make it all work, make it go, and dealing with the daily challenges that most businesses face. Here you're going to learn about what they're doing to overcome those challenges, and hopefully you'll get some ideas to help your own company. So check it out, Successful Not Satisfied. Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to Successful Not Satisfied. I am here with Ken Miller of Erdos Miller. Ken, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you as part of this. So we've been connected for LinkedIn for, I think, just a short period of time. I've done a little research on your company, but I always like to hear from the owners, what's their company all about and what do you guys do?
Well, gee whiz, wouldn't it be nice if I knew that?
I also hear that from a lot of owners too.
I have a lot of passions, and I feel like we try to explore those in the business. But we started off as a consultant, right, or like a contract shop, right? Like Abe and I, when we got going, we were 21, 22 years old. We were moonlighting. We were just taking on jobs as we got them, and we didn't really have an innovative business model. We're like, oh well, these guys will pay us cash to go design this, so we're gonna do that, right? And so there wasn't really a lot of thought to it, other than, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have our own company, right? And so we actually grew a lot doing just contract engineering, right? And I was like in my third or fourth year of business, and I didn't really know what to call it. So I kind of called it consulting. And then I found this book called Contract Engineering one day, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. I had no idea there's a title for this, And so so the first half of our company's history was really around growing billable hours and clients and all these kind of things, and winning projects and bidding against competitors and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we got a little tired of that. So we really were much more passionate about pursuing our own inventions and our own products. And so we began our own internal R&D. We began playing around probably 2012, 11, just trying different things out in the evening. Cause now, we started off moonlighting, and then that became our day job. And then all of a sudden our own inventions are the moonlighting, and our contract work, our operating business is the daytime 9 to 5 thing. Right. But we got really serious and built a team up and started really pursuing our own R&D in 2014. And so right now we're very focused on bringing our products to market, right? And we're at a really cool inflection point, because this year is the first year where the products are taking over the revenue stream, and we are flipping, and it's more than 50% this year will be our own products versus the contract for hire, work for hire kind of stuff we've done in the past, right?
Nice. So what are some of the projects that you're taking on, or what are some of the products?
Well, so I really struggled to find my calling in college, and so
as many people do.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had this story, and it's really, I'm kind of ashamed to tell it, but it's also kind of funny. I remember being at freshman orientation in college, and they say, they do, many colleges do this thing where look to your left, look to your right. Well, only one of you will be here at the end. And, most kids, I'm sure most kids are really determined to make it. And I remember being told that and thinking that and being like, yeah, I'm probably one of those kids who's not going to be here.
I remember that discussion. I started out in engineering, and that was the first words out of their mouth is look around you, because 3 of these people will be gone.
Yeah,
I was extra stubborn, so I stuck it out for about 2 years.
Well, I didn't have a strong will to go to college personally, besides going with my girlfriend, and so that's probably why I had kind of a lackadaisical attitude towards it. I was one of these people that probably would have really benefited from a year or two vocational break before going to college, right? But and my big problem there was I never college never moved at a speed that was sufficient for me. I got an internship at Texas Instruments when I was 17. And by the time I entered college, I'd already programmed firmware on a microcontroller, just learning in my spare time. And so they're like, this is a C compiler. And I'm like, God, guys, come on, we got to go faster. This is driving me nuts. I don't have the patience for this. And what was the root question we were exploring again?
What's the product?
What's the product, right? So anyways, I got really passionate about drilling technology, right? I got into the oil field, and I went out to these drilling rigs all over the States, right? And they just mesmerized me, right? Because there's these massive hundreds of tons of equipment, and they're crazy, and we're drilling 30,000 feet down in the earth. And I got into this niche of the oil field called measurement while drilling, right? And so measurement while drilling is kind of an outlier in the oil field, because everything in the oil field is it's big heavy metal, or it's chemistry, or it's fluids or whatever, right?
Sure.
But measurement well drilling tools, are they comprise the same kind of levels of stock of the electronic software stack as like an iPhone, right? And so to design a measurement while drilling tool successfully, you have to know mechanical engineering, and you have to be able to lay out PCBs and write firmware and software and cloud systems now. And so it's really like designing iPhones for the oil industry, which is pretty cool, right? And so our product is the flagship product right now is called the Micropulse, and it is really like a downhole iPhone for drilling, right? It's a smart device. It's got a circuit board. It's got sensors. It can tell you its inclination and azimuth. We have a developer SDK that our clients use to extend its performance, and so it's a pretty cool product.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how long is it taking you to develop that?
Another joke. The first estimate I was given was $250,000 over 6 months. And we just reflected on some pretty important milestones being hit after 6 years and many millions of dollars. So, I say it really probably became real after a couple of years and a couple $1 million in figuring out how to get traction and what people really wanted and stuff like that, right? But we always followed MVP approach, right? So it's always like build something, test it on the market, build something, test it on the market, right? And so,
sure.
But it took a long time. Like you start on these, like I feel like every journey that ultimately ends up being successful, if someone told you how hard and how much time and how much money it was going to be, you just be like, nah, no thanks. Like I'm good, right? But here we are, right? But I mean, every other entrepreneur that's built a product at all pretty much has that same feeling, right?
Right.
Like the road, knowing the length of the road before beginning the journey would have scared them off.
Right. Well, and you brought up something at the very beginning, which I think is interesting, is you didn't know what you were going to do. You didn't know what you wanted to do. You just kind of tripped into it. And I think that's true of a lot of us, including myself. As I mentioned early on, I started out in electrical engineering, realized I wasn't going to be a fit for that. I tried mechanical engineering. Boy, that was better, but I managed to fight through that for about 2 years. And then I was one of the three that wasn't left when it was all said and done. And now I'm working with people on strategy and culture and development and things like that, which are far and away different from where I started out. But
that's awesome.
We never know where we're going to end up.
Well, I started out in art school.
Oh, okay.
I was enrolled at the University of Houston as a liberal arts major, and I thought I was going to do commercial graphics, right? Like stuff for like billboards and advertising and all sorts of stuff. Because I was really good with Photoshop and 3ds Max and all this kind of stuff, right? But I wasn't I was really good at the technical tools and the technical chops, but I'm not much of an artist, right? Like I can make you a really nice looking website. I can't make you an impressive, inspiring piece of art, right? Like that, I don't, sure. I'm not that deep, right?
Right.
No, I totally get you there.
So you launch your company. It's just the two of you, you and your partner. How long did it take you to scale to, and how many people do you have now?
So we're about 35 now, right?
Okay.
And so we've grown quite a bit. We haven't, taken off and become a Silicon Valley billionaire unicorn just yet with 10,000 employees. So, but we actually got up to about 50 people, and then the oil field crashed in 15, and that put us through some very painful times. Mm-hmm. And I was actually gun shy on hiring for a couple of years after that. But we've actually, I feel like the foundation we're building on now is so much more strong, right? And so directly answer your question, about 35 people right now. But yeah, I mean, getting into entrepreneurship for me was nothing but determination, stubbornness, and thinking hey, these other guys that I've met run businesses and they're real dumb, so I can definitely do it,
They can make it, I can.
Well, but yeah, and I mean, the second contract I ever got when we were doing contracting, I got because I just happened to walk into the right seedy bar and play pool with a guy who needed electronics contract engineering.
Wow.
You can't make that up. You can make it up. It's easy to make up. But you can. It's you can't plan for that, right?
Right.
You can't. That's just happenstance, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So
I
now
love
there's
the
a
title
shift
of your podcast, by the way.
What's that?
I love the title of your podcast. By the way,
well, thank you.
Because I have the typical entrepreneur's disease where I still look at myself as a complete failure, right?
Right.
So, but successful, not satisfied. just the title of it almost allows me to forgive myself and at least consider myself semi-successful now, while acknowledging there's so much more that I want to build, right?
Well, that was the idea behind it. And
Yeah.
what you're saying is not uncommon. And I think you even pointed that out, is very common for all of us at some point to feel like we're not good enough or we're not smart enough. And somehow we managed to trick everyone into believing so. And that got us this far.
Well, I would imagine that I would imagine a significant double-digit percentage of entrepreneurs have the same disease I do, where I go, well, I'm not yet in the company of Jobs and Bezos, so I must be shit or crap.
Right.
Excuse my French, right? And so I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way and beats themselves up unfairly, comparing themselves to people that just, we're not just very passionate and very talented, but like very much happen to be in the right place at the right time, right?
Right. Yep. And you never know when that time's going to be. For some people, it's very early in their life. Bless them. Other people, it comes a lot later. So you just never know when that's going to hit.
That's the unpredictability, the luck part, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, like, I feel like the formula for being an entrepreneur is pretty similar to like, being a rock star. And people are like, well, how can you know what the formula to being a rock star is? That's really unpredictable. Like, no, it's not unpredictable at all. It's like, it's really simple, right? You got to have a little bit of talent. Like, you got to have a little bit of something. You got to be willing to work your tail off incredibly. And then you got to accept that there's a little bit of luck to it, right? And that's the formula. It's not complicated, but if you're not putting yourself out there, if you're not out there networking and playing gigs or whatever your equivalent is, it's just not going to happen, right? I guess
exactly.
They don't do these gigs anymore. They just post videos on YouTube and then they become Lord. But you get my point, right?
Right. Well, even the people that post stuff on YouTube, it's very rare that somebody just posts one video and that turns into something. Right? It's usually video after video after video, and it's a long term. I don't know of a lot of people that are overnight successes, because those overnight successes took years.
I very much appreciate those graphics that talk, that really show, how much, how long it takes to really get that going to where like you hit that hockey stick growth, right? Like, the hockey stick chart, right? Like if you just take a hockey stick, lay it on its side, it's real flat for a long time, and then it goes whoop, all of a sudden, right? I mean, one of the things that I actually found inspiring was like, Mark Zuckerberg, obviously like billionaire, famous entrepreneur, all this kind of stuff, right? I watched an early video of him talking about Facebook in the early days, right? And he's talking about like, yeah, well, we're going to expand to all the colleges, and then we'll probably go international colleges. Now that'll be it. And we'll have a good market, right? And I'm like,
right,
my God, like he was the CEO of Facebook, and he had no idea what was coming. Like it wasn't like this grand vision where he knew that one day he'd control the biggest social media in the world, and that was the grand plan from the beginning. Like even for him, it was evolutionary and happenstance, right? Like yes, he worked his tail off and he had a very innovative thing, but like day one, he did not wake up one day and say, I'm going to build a social media network that controls the world's mind, right? Like that didn't happen, right?
And the irony of all this is colleges are probably where he's least impactful, because now what the average demographic is probably like 30 plus.
Yeah, but there's a really important entrepreneurial lesson there, right? In that he, he saturated each stepping stone market, right? Like he focused on all the just on his college. Then he focused it on the other colleges, and then he opened it to high schoolers and middle schoolers, and then it was the world, right? And like, you can imagine, if you think about that, like when he controlled the market that it had access to, the people that were coming on board the platform had relevancy immediately, right? Because if you're at the same college as him, it's relevant because, it's all the other people that I earn my classes and I'm interesting, right? If you imagine if he just opened the gates to the world day one, some guy in Russia joins, some guy in China joins, some guy in Brazil joins, and they're like, I don't know, you got nothing in common. Why would I be on this platform? What's the point, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, there's even a little miniature entrepreneur lesson in there, and like gating out how you approach the markets, right?
Right.
Or expanding the markets.
Yep. Yeah, we learn a lot from where we start to where we end up isn't always the same place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it's like, I just want to continue the journey, right? Like, I mean, I found that I'm pretty satisfied with my life as long as I am pushing myself harder, pushing myself out of the comfort zone and growing every day, right? Like I get very upset when I find myself in a rut doing the same old thing, not growing, not learning, not becoming better at what I do at least, right? And so, as long as I have that positive trajectory, I'm going to embrace, Warren Buffett's concept of the snowball, right? And you just gotta You just got to push it day after day after day until it becomes this massive snowball rolling down at everybody else's little snowballs, right?
Yep, exactly. And that's actually a pretty good segue. So you go from you and a partner to now you've got 35 plus people. You were up to 50 at one point.
Yep.
What's the change from being the guy who is probably punching in the code to now being the guy who is directing other people to do the work that's tied to your vision?
It's really funny. I did a lot of the engineering work early on. I'm pretty dangerous with software. But even recently, I actually got a bit of a breather to do some coding myself, right?
Nice.
Before the crash, the growth for us was really easy. Like we started getting contracts, and we were young, and we were good at what we did, and we were aggressive, and so most of our competitors were like, guys that retired from Schlumberger in their 50s or 60s, and they're kind of sleepy, and they're like, we just want to do things the way we did in the past, and we know. So like competition was easy. So like we added a whole ton of headcount without investing into things like culture or processes or whatever else. Like we got to 50 people, and we didn't have a single process in the freaking company, like nothing, right? Like it was terrifying. We had an auditor come in, and this guy's been a great business mentor for me, but like we were trying to go through this thing called the CSIA audit, which is the Consulting Systems Integrators Association, which is a great organization that really focuses on technology systems integrators companies, right? He came in, they have like their own certification similar to ISO 9001, and he came in to do a pre-audit, which is like a checkup to make sure that you're likely to pass the audit, so you don't just pay for the audit and fail. Right. And he spends about 15 minutes, and he's like, do you have this? And we're like, nope. Do you have this? Do you have nope. Do you have this? And then he just closes the book. And he's like, we're done here. We got such a long way to go. It's not even funny, right? But I mean, that gentleman has become a mentor to our business. We fly him in once a quarter. We spend an entire day with him, and like he has been absolutely instrumental and literally saved our company. It's been fantastic to have him. But after the crash, I really had to rebuild things, right? And so I really at that point, like we became an entirely new company, and I sat down and I truly invested into things like our core values, right? And it's crazy to see like our core values, like we live and breathe and hire and fire and die by these things, right?
That's great.
And like if you go to our website and look at our core values, like they are not just the poster that everybody else puts on the wall in the break room because corporate needed to check off the fact that they had core values, right? Like we really thought about like what is it that makes us good? Like what is it that has people work with us and engage with us? What have we seen our employees do that most exhibits the spirit we want to embody? We captured that in our 4 core values. And what's crazy is like what's happened since then, right? Like we had I hired a gentleman named Chris Conger, and he's our integrator. I'm not sure if you're familiar with EOS, but we use the EOS processes. And so I'm the visionary, he's the integrator, right? And and I mean, he built an entire hiring process and coaching process around the core values. And it's like just amazing what came out of that foundation, right? Like one of the most inspiring things I had is we had this wonderful employee named Rahama, and like she on her own printed a t-shirt with the core values on them and came to work. And I was like, that is like nice. One of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. Like, that's amazing, right?
That's ownership.
That's
ownership.
Oh yeah, it was incredible, right? But and that's why I was talking about, like, I feel like we have a much more strong foundation right now because, I used to have this feeling like, let's get to the next project and then we'll be successful. Let's build the next thing, then we'll be successful. And then, after the crash and everything and rebuilding, I kind of said, you know what, I love technology. I want to see our company produce a lot of technology products, but I'm not going to go right after the technology. I'm going to invest in the human element, and I'm going to get that right. And the technology will flow from that. And so far that's been working. Right. And so, and like I mentioned, we were following the EOS process. And so for a long time, I was kind of a dual visionary integrator. Right. And like that prohibited me from doing anything technical. Right. Like I just didn't have time, because when I wasn't talking to customers or setting the vision for a project, I was processing freaking invoices, right? And so,
as a lot of owners do.
Yeah, well, and so, but Chris has been great, and we split aside this visionary integrator thing, and that has really allowed me to really just go where I need to go, right, and focus on thinking long term. And like I said, I mean, last quarter I actually got a break, and I got to go help the guys out and roll my sleeves up and write some code again. And that was I wrote like a AIML database system we're using internally to improve one of our products. and it was fun. It grounded me, right? You know, I can't do that all the time, but it's nice to do it every once in a while.
Are you feeling like a prisoner in your own business? And what I mean by that is you spent all your time growing this company and you've gotten it to a point where it should be functioning on its own, but you still find yourself doing more than you should. You're getting way more in the details and you're getting stuck working on things that you have the staff and the team to actually solve for you. If you're finding that you're stuck here and that you can't find a way out, you can't seem to grow your top line sales or your bottom line revenue, please feel free to reach out. Check out danpaulsonletsgo.com. That's Dan Paulson, letsgo.com, to learn a little bit more about me and my company and what I can do to help you out. You can always reach out to me there and schedule a meeting. There's no obligation, no cost, and I might be able to provide you with some solutions that can help you get out of your own way. You keep mentioning the crash. Could you tell me a little bit more about what happened there? Because I think you said around 2015. So what changed in your market that caused that outcome?
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, you know, oil just hit the price of oil hit a massive glut oversupply in about Thanksgiving of 14, right? And the entirety of the market crashed here. I mean, here it's all very short-term decision making with the drilling. We sell tools that are used for drilling, they're consumables, and so oil price drops, activity drops, need for our products drop, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty rough, right? And so that was a big one. And we had another crash, you know, just now in 2020. But what was really different, like 2020, it crashed because of COVID, right? Everybody stops flying, everybody stops driving, need for oil goes down, like across the world, like had another big crash, right? But it was a night and day difference, right? Because you know, the last crash was really rough through 15 and it bottomed out in the middle of 16. And we kind of rebuilt the company 17, 18, 19, right? And so last time we kind of like, you know, really saturated and grown fast without any sort of like strong foundation, I'd say. And so we were like complete victims of the crash, right? And so like as soon as the crash came around, like revenue's dropping, we're having to lay people off. I was absolutely idiotic and I did like layoffs as I had to and not like one big round to avoid the pain, you know, like It was miserable. Right. And, but the market crashed again in 20 and we just kept growing the whole time. Like we added headcount while everyone else is like dropping people, you know, and I have to think that that's because our foundation is so strong and like, we're really focused on the right opportunities, even like in the market. And so like really going back and reinvesting in the human element significantly insulated us from the market. And like last year I had to be quiet because, you know, a lot of people were like, oh my God, we're laying more people off today. It's miserable. I hate my life. And I'm like, we're having a great time over here. We're going nuts over here. Like we just keep growing in a down market. So like, I'm not going to brag.
So yeah, you want to be careful about who you brag to, don't you?
Well, I don't like to brag in general. Right. But, I like to think that I can talk about the things I'm talking about confidently because these scars, if I were to lift up my shirt, are pretty horrendous, right? But you know, metaphorically, not literally.
Right. So what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now as you continue to grow?
Well, so I would say one of them is like focus, right? And so focusing on one market, one thing, one product was something that really helped us rebuild in 17. But right now that's going well, and it's really a hard balance to strike as to what to do and what not to do, right? And you know, one of the things that I'm a big Steve Jobs fan. One of the things that I've always appreciated him saying is like, it's not what you say yes to, it's what you say no to. And like saying no is so hard. Like, especially when a client walks in the door and says, I will give you money to do X. Like it's really hard to say no, right? Like it's really hard to say no, but you know, Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, which is a huge angel fund out in Silicon Valley, he has a great thing, which he says the worst distractions are the ones that pay, right? And so I
exactly.
found that a good correlation or extra ammo, right? And so like right now we're positioned and like the market is now seeing us as a technology leader in our market, which is great. And so there's an adjacent market that we want to expand into, right? We want to expand into that adjacent market because it interests us technically. It's not tied to the price of oil, at least not as heavily. So it would give us some diversification, right? And so now we're like, okay, well, is it too early, right? Because when you're thinking about like doing something different, there's a couple wrong answers, right?
Right.
Out of a spectrum of infinite answers, there's two wrong ones. When you're bleeding to death and things aren't working right, and you're trying to like hold on for dear life, that is not the time to expand in a new market, right?
Right.
So don't do it then. The other one is, after you've saturated your existing market so well that you're like bored and there's nothing else left to do. Well, you waited too long, right?
Right.
And so like we got to find where in the middle here is the right time to keep what we have going and then try and get into something else, right? And so I'm trying to find that balance right now. That's difficult, right?
Yeah. No, that's I think again a lot of people are facing that, especially right now. There were a lot of companies affected by COVID, positively, negatively, or otherwise, and I hear from a lot of people that they're kind of in that limbo area where either things are going really well and is that going to continue, or their business has shifted and now how do they adapt to that and how do they get more proactive? I think this has been a wake-up call for a number of businesses, because I know in a lot of the work I do, we talk about, well, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And we always talk about, well, income goes to zero. That would be the worst case scenario. Well, when would that happen? And pandemic was never in the discussion. So now we've even had to update how we approach things.
How does anyone plan for a black swan event, right?
Exactly.
I was really annoyed. I was playing this little game the other day. I got off Steam called Airport CEO, and it's a really fun game because you get to build your airport and control the traffic flow and where all the planes land and everything else. And I got this wonderful, you get to hire employees and you have to hire your executive team. And I'm watching myself play this game, and I'm like, first of all, like, what's wrong with me? Why in my free time do I play a game where I manage a company? Like, that's like, why can't I relax and play like Minecraft or something, right?
Right.
But in the game, they'd recently added a simulation to simulate a massive pandemic, right? And so all my revenues from the planes landing go to zero, and I'm having to like lay off employees in the game. And I'm like, this is not fair. I could not control that event. This is some baloney, right? And so, I mean, we definitely got affected by COVID. We were just lucky that we're not one of those businesses that like it was just in the path of the train or the stampede.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't want to own a movie theater right now. Wouldn't want to own an airline, right? All these kind of things.
Or a travel agency.
And so, travel agency. But I mean, that really ties back into the focus with struggle, right? Because I have embraced that in the modern world that you have to become an aggressive autodidact, right? Like you have to, who's never satisfied with stopping learning. Like if you're not teaching yourself, taking it upon yourself to learn how to teach yourself, and then accepting constant growing and retraining and all this kind of stuff, I don't believe you're going to make it in the modern world. Like that is just what the modern world expects of us. I am not living in my father's world where you could become really good at one thing and do that your whole life. Like that's not where we live anymore. And so that applies to individuals as well as companies, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you can like the default state is it's really easy. And the default state for most companies is to just grab any opportunity that comes in the door, right?
Right.
And the next level of focus is like having the maturity to say, no, I'm not going to take all these other opportunities. I'm really just going to focus on the one thing, right? And that's a powerful thing. It's hard to get there, and it will give you a very powerful sense of a very powerful ability to execute, right? Like one of the things that I admire most about Apple, if we look at them as like a analogy for designing your own company, is like their ability to focus even at their size is just astounding, right? Because if you can imagine, I mean, I bet you there'd be like, if you just allowed a ton of mediocre middle managers to get into Apple, I bet you they could justify all sorts of ridiculous R&D and things to try different things, right? Because Apple, unlimited billions of dollars. Why don't we just try everything? Wrong focus, right? But then once you do that, then you have a next, like, it's frustrating in this life, right? Because you have to work really hard to be successful. And then once you're successful, you have to work really hard to not become unsuccessful again. And so the biggest thing you're at risk for once you're able to maturely say no and attain focus is now you're at risk for having your blinders on, right? And staying too focused and not taking a bet on something else and not expanding your business passes, right? I mean, I'm like right now we're very passionate about drilling tools. I mean, and part of our vision is we want to be, when we're drilling on asteroids and on the moon in space, like we want our tools to be loaded on the SpaceX rockets and go into space and drill, right? And so, but I mean, we've got to realize that like there's going to be other opportunities. And like, there's a path for our company that, maybe one day we just stop developing drilling tools entirely, if that's the right thing to do, right? And where we go, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're really focused on is the humans in our company and making sure that they're growing, learning, expanding, well-paid, healthy, happy, all these kind of things. And as long as we can do that, like the nature of what the product is somewhat secondary, right?
Right. So what steps are you taking to do that?
Oh man. I am carving out specific time to just think, which is really hard, right? To do that. And it's easy to execute. It's easy for anybody to be a task monkey and just go from task to task to task to task, to like customer requests and all this kind of stuff, right? But like, that's been tough for me, right? I listen to a lot of podcasts and I read a lot of audiobooks. Like, I've taken the habit of biking about an hour every day, and I have a podcast going, and everyone can always tell when I'm biking because I'll stop every 5 minutes and shoot somebody a text with an idea or something else like that, right? But I would just say the biggest thing is I'm learning and educating myself, right? I'm an ex-TIer. I spent 5 years at TI, and TI. I hope we have a path like TI, because one of the things I really want to do is I want to build a big company that goes on and grows and learns and goes on beyond me, right?
Right.
And TI is a huge semiconductor corporation. Everyone thinks they make calculators and that's their big business. Wrong. It's microcontrollers for automotive and medical and all this kind of stuff. Semiconductor is a huge business for them. But I mean, their origins, were 100 years ago, where they made geophones for the oil field, and their origin has nothing to do with where they are now, right?
Right.
As opposed to Apple, who has always been doing computers, and Amazon, who's always been doing distribution, right?
Right.
And so,
well, Apple even changed, though. I mean, Apple really shifted to music from computers, and then has kind of come full circle.
Well,
but it was really kind of the iPod and stuff that reinvigorated Apple and got them growing again.
Oh, I totally agree, and I hate to be an Apple head, but I do love them as an example. And what I really admire about them is the comeback, right? Like after they near bankruptcy, coming back in, focusing up, rebuilding the company, all this kind of stuff. But you know what? We love the Mac. We're going to focus on the Mac, and we're going to do nothing else but the Mac until the Mac is what we want, right? They wouldn't have got to where they want today, right? Like the best way to help the Mac was to go build the damn iPod, right? And that led them to the iPhone. And the amount of Macs they're shipping today, if they had done nothing but embellish the Mac, there'd be no way that they'd be shipping as many Macs as they are today had they not followed the whole iPod path, right?
Yep.
Which is, I mean, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. How do you evaluate that kind of opportunity? Because it'd be very easy to be in Apple and say, our core competency is the Mac. We need to focus on that, and then silently be at risk for putting those blinders on, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, it's great that you're investing in your people and keeping that growth going. It sounds like things are going wonderful. As we're wrapping up here, one of the questions I always ask my guess is, if there's one thing you could tell an entrepreneur, and it doesn't have to be a new entrepreneur, but maybe it's even somebody who's, been in their company for 20, 30, 40 years, what's the most important thing they should be learning or doing to keep the growth going?
Investing in themselves, taking care of themselves, right? And one of the things that I've really had to accept is, like, if I don't, like, I literally tell myself to get on the bike this every day. It's like, if I do not exercise, I'm not taking care of myself, and I can't grow my company. So you have to go to the most foundational thing and start from there, right? And so I'd say, really taking care of yourself and your mental health and your physical health is absolutely foundational, which seems like really lame advice. And maybe it is, and maybe I'm becoming this old dude who like gives out the really lame advice these days, but it's hard to impart on the younger guys like how important that is. But and then after that, I would say educating yourself, and education in my mind comes from really paying attention to the world, paying attention to what other companies are doing, paying attention, learning from, whatever source you can, blogs, podcasts, books, audiobooks, whatever. And then, I would also say one of the other things that I found absolutely instrumental is peer groups. Like, go out and talk to other CEOs and get advice from them as to how they're handling it, right? Like, go out and find a really good non-competitive CEO buddy, and you guys can trade all sorts of secrets. And, he can tell you the thing that cost him $100,000, and you can tell him the thing that cost you $100,000. You can both save each other some money, right?
Right. Exactly. No, that's great advice. And actually, that's something I'm working on here in the near future, is putting together a
And
CEO
don't
group.
let me pretend like I have it together. Like my exercising streak is like 4 weeks right now. We'll see if I can keep it going.
Yeah. Well, 4 weeks is a good start. You're kind
Right?
of
It's not bad, right?
you're past the hurdle of, usually 3 weeks is the cutoff. If you start January 1st, usually by January 15th, January 21st, you're done. So
Well,
if you've made it this far, you're pretty much on your way.
what seems to be working for me right now is I set a very low goal. I said, Ken, you're going to exercise 15 minutes a day. You can do more. You can't do any less, but it's 15 minutes a day, period. So you got to get out and do something for 15 minutes a day. And so far, surprisingly setting an extremely low bar has been the one thing in my life that has worked for me to build a habit.
Yep. Well, I
Which is
think you made
crazy.
it key. Most people set a very high goal that they have very little chance of achieving. And then after a couple weeks, they get burned out, where you're setting something that's manageable.
And I did
And
that.
you can build off of manageability. So first build the habit.
Easy, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I'm the guy who had the hubris or the lack of hubris and set the high bar and failed at the high bar 50 times over before I just said, all right, we got to try something else.
Right.
You know?
That's not working.
Yeah, that's not working.
Well, Ken, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation. Again, hope all the best for your company as you continue to grow, and we'll love to hear from you again as you take on those new challenges. Hopefully, drilling on the moon in a couple of years. That's definitely a possibility.
There you go. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the invitation, and best of luck to you, sir.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks again for checking out Successful Not Satisfied. Hopefully there's something you learned and you're able to take away and use in your own company. Check out our next episode in the coming weeks. And also, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, KGI Design Group. They have been instrumental in helping put these podcasts and many other things together for us. They do a lot of my graphics and my branding. And if you need help with that, I urge you to contact them. KGIDesignGroup.com. Thanks again.